The things that you will need for this video is a ruler, a pair of scissors, and a pen, as well as the fabric that you are planning to use. You will need your outside fabric as well as a lining fabric. Okay, so now it is time to cut the fabric for our project bag. You need 2 pieces of fabric. You need one lining color and one outside fabric color. And you will need to cut 2 pieces of each fabric. So you'll need 2 pieces of lining and 2 pieces of outside fabric. So what that looks like is you need a 14 by 10 piece of outside fabric and then another 14 by 10 inch piece of outside fabric. And then you'll need a 14 by 10 piece of lining and then another 14 by 10 piece of lining. So for a total of 4 14 by 10 pieces of fabric. Now this one, while it is 14 inches across, it is much too long to make my 10 inches. So what I need to do is I need to cut this down to be my correct size. So what that looks like is I want to cut it this way, right? Because I know that this side is 14 by 10. So I want to cut some amount off. So I'm going to fold it in half to make it more manageable for myself. For this, you need scissors, a ruler, and a pen. And then I'll measure from one end 10 inches. Now my ruler is broken, so you need to make sure when you do this that you don't have one of my broken rulers from my classroom. So I measured 10 inches and I make a little mark here for myself. And I make a little mark here. But because it's folded in half, I was able to put the full length of the ruler on the fabric to ensure that it is a straighter line. And then I can cut, my fabric for my first 14 by 10 piece. And then I need to cut another 14 by 10 piece because our bag is going to sit up like this. So then when I cut the next piece, I do the exact same thing. I measure to make sure I have enough. Draw some lines. Here we go. Make the mark. Make sure it's straight and lined up. And then I use my scissors. And I cut. So I have a little bit of extra, right, that I'm cutting off, which I'm going to be able to use for the casing. So now I have 2 pieces of 14 by 10. So I have 2 pieces here. And then I need to make a casing. My casing needs to be approximately, and this is where you can use a little bit of your discretion, anywhere between 2 inches and 3 inches. This one is 2.5, which is going to be just fine. So it needs to be 2.5 inches wide, and it needs to be 9 inches in length. So I'm going to take it here. I'm going to measure again, making sure, because I have a broken ruler, so making sure that I do this properly. I count 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Making sure that I count, and then I mark the ruler again. And I cut this piece. I need 2 casings. So I'll need to cut a second one of these. And because this is my outside, I then also need to cut the lining. So cut all of your pieces. I can use this spare piece for another one of my casings. So you'll need to cut the lining, 1 more of these, and then I have my outside. So cut all of that and then join me back for the next video. Okay, so I've now cut out my lining fabric, my main fabric, and my casings. For this next part, I still need a pen, a ruler, and a pair of scissors. So the next part that I need to do is I need to cut out the corners of the lining and the outside of the fabric. So I'm going to lay them on top of each other like this. And if when I lay them on top of each other, it turns out that they're not pretty close to the same size, you'll need to trim them down so that they are the same size. So you see that I've got them laid on top of each other. Laying them on top of each other just makes it a little bit easier and faster. So I'm leaving my casings off to the side, and now along the short sides, I need to cut the short side, this side, I need to cut out 2-inch squares. So the way I do that is I measure, and now my ruler may be broken, so I'm going to mark here, and then I will mark here. Then I also need to mark here, as well as marking here. So I've marked where I want to draw my lines. So then I can estimate where I need to draw the corners and cut them out. So I'm going to cut this out. I'm going to draw my lines across. Like this. So then you can see that I've got this drawn, so then I know where to cut. So then I can cut this out. And this out. And then I'll cut this out. And this out. So now my piece should look like this. It's got the bottom cut out, and I have 2 little squares there, and it's all cut out at the same time. Now I can throw these 2 squares away because I don't want to leave my space messy. So this is the end of what your cutting tutorial, and the next thing we're going to do is sew this together. So for this tutorial, you need to have your sewing machine already set up and threaded. If you don't know how to do that, go back and watch the videos on how to thread your sewing machine. So for step 1, I need my casings that are the 2 skinny strips like this. And for this step, I am going to be folding the short ends in. So I need to fold the short ends in, and just like this. And I want to fold the wrong side together, right? So this is the outside, and then this is the inside. And I need to sew all 4 sides. So I'm going to sew this side, and this side, and then this side, and this side. So I'm going to do that, and then I will join you back. Okay, so now I have sewn all of these, the 2 hems on each side. And the next thing that I need to do is I need to get my front pieces, which are these pieces, and I need 1. I'll do both, but I'm only going to do 1 for now. So I'll put this off to the side. So I have my front piece, which is the larger one, and then my smaller casing. So I need to fold my casing in half, and I want to make sure that my hem, the raw side, is on the inside. So I'm going to fold my casing in half, and I'm going to sew it onto the top. Now, I'm an experienced sewer. I've sewed for a decent amount, but you may be newer, so you may want to use pins. So if you're going to use pins, you're going to place pins at 3 spaces along here, and I will show you what that looks like with some pins. So I have a tin of pins, and I'm going to pin my piece to the front piece so that it doesn't slip and move when I sew it. So I've put 3 pins, and you'll notice that I've put the pins going perpendicular to the seam I'm going to sew. It makes it a lot easier. So now I've got this pinned. I would pin the other one as well, and then I'm going to sew right along this line for both of them. And when I'm done with that, we'll come join you again. Okay, for the next step, it is time to sew my side seams together. So I need to sew the front together as well as the back. So for the front, I have this with the little casing. So I need to lay my front out. And then I also have my other front. So it's like this, right? This, I know it's the front because if I flip this up right here, it'll be a nice seam. So I need to do right sides together. So I need to put my two right sides together, and I want to make sure that my casings are down low. And I'm going to pin along this side as well as along the short side here, and then along the far side there. So I'm not going to pin this little box bit. I'm skipping this box bit. And then I will do the exact same thing with the inside. I will put right sides together like this, so they're matching. And then I will sew along this side, which is over here, and this side, and I'm skipping these little boxes. So I'm going to pin it and then sew it. So you can see that I have pinned the inside where I'm going to sew. So the next part of it, I've got both of these sewn up on the sides, you can see here. So the next part is that you need to make your box bottom. So how I'm gonna make the box bottom is I have to pull these sides apart. So they were stuck together like this, and I pinched each sides, and I'm pushing them together like this so that the two seams that I made come together. I'll show you it a couple more times. And then I pin them down because I'm going to sew right across this line here. That's where I need to sew. So then I need to do the same thing on this side. I pull them apart, line the two seams up together, and then pin them like this. Because I'm going to sew across right there. And I have to do it to the white one as well, because this is my front, and I need to pin this down as well. So I pulled it, lined the seams up together like this, and then I pinned it, and then I pulled it like this, lined the two seams up together. You can see there's a seam from that side, there's a seam from this side. I'm going to pin them together because where I'm sewing is right across here. I'm sewing right where my fingers are. This line is where I'm going to sew. I'm about to go do that. Okay, so now I have both of my bags. One is wrong side out, like this. See, it's kind of standing up like a bag now. The other one is the right side, like this. So, oops, I left some pins in it. So what I need to do now is I need to turn the right sides together. So the right side, my white fabric, needs to get turned so that it is, what's it called? Its right side is facing out, like this, all the way through. And this is a good time for me to check to make sure I didn't have any holes in my thing or anything like that, right? So this is my right side, and then this is my wrong side. So I'm going to put right sides together. So I'm matching the checks up with the circles, and I'm going to put one bag inside the other bag like this. So the brown or the checkered lining is here. And then I need to pin these two bags along the top together. And I want to be careful. If you want to cut all these threads, you can. I want to be careful to line up my seams. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be sewing all the way around the top, but I need to leave a little gap so that I can turn them the correct way once I'm done sewing. So my next step is to pin these sides together. And I like to leave a little gap right here. The gap should at least be 2 or 3 inches. You don't have to measure it, but a good sizable gap that you can put your hand in. So I'm just going to pin it all the way around so it's nice and secure for me to sew it. Like this. Oops. And one more pin. So most of my threads are going to get tucked inside, so I'm not worried about cutting them yet. But eventually we will need to cut it to tidy up. So I want to remember that this is my big gap. So I'm going to start sewing right here. I'm going to sew here and go all the way around, but I'm going to stop right here. And if I'm not sure I'm going to remember to stop, I'll put 2 pins here to remind me to stop. So I know to stop at the double pins, just in case I need a little bit of a reminder. I just finished sewing, and now it's time to pull all my pins out. So I'll pull my pins out, and it is almost time for the, as I tell my students, the magic bit. And what I need to do, got all my pins out. So now I'm going to turn it inside, right side out. So I've got this hole here. I'm going to stick my hand in, and I try and reach to the far corners to pull it out. So I'm going to pull it and turn it so it all comes out like this. And it looks a little bit silly right now, but it'll plump right up in just a second. So I stuff the inside in the inside of the bag like this. And I spend some time flattening it out and ironing it out so it looks really nice and helpful. So once I've ironed this all out, the next step is to top stitch this line right here. So it's really important that you get it all nice and secure the way you want it, because you're going to be top stitching right along this whole edge here, because you're covering and you're closing this hole that you have, because you don't want to have accidental 2 holes in your bag. So I'm going to go do that right now. So I have finished my bag. It's got a little, I had a little thread debacle there, but if I cared enough to want to change it, I could and rip it back out, but I will pan out so you can see what my bag looks like. So it's pretty tall. It's good for lunches, or maybe you could even put some gym clothes in it. I need to clip the threads, and then you can run ribbon through the casings, but that is your drawstring bag. Here, I'll fold it so you can take a look at it top down. This took me about an hour start to finish. Granted, I also did have to pause and set up the camera. So I'd say this probably takes me about 50 minutes to make. It's a pretty quick, easy bag, and I hope this was helpful.